So I got early access to Skirk, and I'll be honest, we are looking at probably the most broken DPS since Movwika entered the chat. But I'm sure most of you know by now there's always a catch, and this time around, it's a big one, let me tell you. Which is why I am going to do a massive showcase here of more than 12 teams plus 3 different playstyles, and provide you with an honest breakdown of each teammate and how much damage can Skirk actually deal when she's in free-to-play versus premium team. So strap in because we're going deep with this ultimate Constellation Zero Skirk showcase video. Quick disclaimer, I made this video with the creator experience server, so footage shown here is subject to change. In fact, we're in a bit of a peculiar situation. 2 of the best free-to-play swords, Finale of the Deep and Calamity of Eshu, are not available on this server, and instead, I'll be using Absolution, which actually is like few percent better than Finale, and even weaker than Eshu in certain teams. So honestly, it's not that big of a deal. Plus, I think it looks pretty on her. Now, as for artifacts, I'll be using Finale of the Deep Gallery set, but I'll also talk about Hunter set, which is about as good or even better sometimes to use than Finale. Finally, normal attack and burst talents are at level 9, while the skill is at level 10, which I'll explain why it's like that later on, and then of course, she's Constellation Zero. Okay, so what is up with this Slayer? Well, to put it simply, she's the second character who does not rely on energy, and instead, she uses a unique resource system which can be utilized in 3 different playstyles: on-field normal attack spammer, quick swap burst, and a special hybrid combination of the 2. She also heavily relies on a team comp made up of only Cryo and Hydro teammates. In fact, here's a quick example. Barbara, who does nothing in this team, is actually a better option for Skirk than C0 Shilonen with Cinder City and signature weapon. So Shilonen, who provides tons of support and buffing, still ends up about 7% weaker than good old Barbara, who just stands there menacingly. I am baiting you here a little bit, and I'll fully explain how this works later in the video, but majority of time, this will be a legit situation. Anyway, so looking at Skirk's normal attacks, they deal some physical damage, look cool, but other than that, you will never want to use these outside of world exploration to finish up a mob or 2. And that's because her true normal attacks will be used when you tap the skill, which allows her to enter the 7-phase flash mode. This is such a shonen name. But yeah, in this mode, she actually gains Cryo Infusion. You'll also notice this bar, similar to Night Soul, that displays the skill's duration, and while it lasts, Skirk can do this beautiful 5-hit combo, which I'll just call N5. And there's also her charge attack, but aside from a niche function, it's quite terrible in terms of damage. And unlike a certain child, Skirk can perform Plunge in her skill mode, but should you use it seriously in combat? Nah. Still, Skirk could have taught Child how to do this. Now, the skill can also be held down, which boosts her movement speed and turns Skirk into a fish mermaid, I guess. By the way, while dashing, both tap and hold versions of the skill allows her to hover above water, so that's pretty useful. Oh, and one other important thing I forgot to mention, when in her skill mode, Skirk essentially has near infinite resistance to interruption, so there's a bigger chance you'll just die with her from all the damage rather than get interrupted. Finally, Skirk's burst is quite simple. You tap the button and it will deliver a massive payload of damage. Oh, and fun fact, while Skirk needs no regular energy, she still generates 4 cryo particles. But interestingly enough, the particles are generated the moment she deals any source of cryo damage, which includes using her burst, and I don't think anyone else can do this. But is that all there is to Skirk? In a nutshell, yeah. Well, except for this little small detail I glossed over. Serpent Subtlety, the unique energy system that Skirk relies on. Basically, you can gain 45 points of Serpent Subtlety when she uses the skill, and then the only other way to gain more of it has to do with her first passive. When anyone in the team causes Frozen, Superconduct, Cryo Swirl, and Cryo Crystallize reactions, a Void Rift will appear. 3 at most can exist, and by themselves, they do absolutely nothing, and it's up to Skirk to consume them. If she's in her tapped skill mode, then by using Charge Attack or the burst button, she will absorb all Void Rifts on the field. Otherwise, she can also absorb them when holding down the skill. And each Void Rift gives 8 Serpent Subtlety, or 24 at most. Now, this is where we have to talk about all her playstyles, because the way she consumes Void Rifts and utilizes Serpent Subtlety dictates her playstyle. Okay, so starting off with normal attack spamming. By tapping, she gains 45 points, and then usually there will be 3 rifts on the field when setting up the rotation, so the best way to absorb them is by actually tapping the burst button. This is a special burst. It will not deal any damage, and instead, all rifts will be absorbed, and then her next 10 normal attacks will deal increased damage. Plus, for every Void Rift, it will be increased further. Now, normally, by doing this quick combo of EQ and spamming N5, she will end up with 69 points, and every 1 second consumes 7 Serpent Subtlety, so this allows her to dish out around 3 5-hit combos, or N5s. However, it's possible more rifts will be created while she's in this mode, so usually using charge attack to absorb the rifts somewhere in this combo can result in longer duration, and for my own testing, I can achieve roughly 4 N5s plus N3. But the mode immediately ends after 12.5 seconds no matter how much Serpent Subtlety is left. Sad. I know, let's stack a bunch of attack speed on her and see what happens then. Okay, so with 8% attack speed from Big Chungus, I was able to get about 2 extra normals. Then with 20% attack speed from Dahlia, this resulted in an entire extra N5 combo. Then with 25% attack speed from Mika, it was also extra N5 combo, but easier to achieve. And then, I just decided to max out attack speed, 65% to be precise, even though only 60% is the cap. But thanks to Skyward Blade, DPC Artifact set, and both Dahlia and Mika, I was zooming around so much, I could almost achieve 5 N5s. Now, is this going to be realistic? For the maxed out attack speed? Nah, I don't think so. Also, please understand that this server is giving me a huge ping of around 150 ms, and I know there's a way to dash cancel N5, but with this lag, I was trying my best to see the differences. So take these results with a grain of salt, and they are more here for anecdotal purposes. However, I do believe Dahlia or Mika providing that attack speed boost ends up as a decent teammate option for Skirk, because that extra N5 is actually quite powerful. But yeah, long story short, this is the standard combo string I've been showing, which can then be extended even further with extra charge attacks if more Void Rifts appear on the field. Now, moving over to the Burst playstyle, it requires 50 Serpent Subtlety. However, you might have noticed that when tapping, the points immediately start decreasing, and even the burst is different. So you cannot use this Burst playstyle in tap mode, and instead, you will want to hold down the skill, and then Skirk will absorb nearby Void Rifts, which means with 45 points gained initially, even one Rift is enough to trigger the burst. However, for every point after 50, the burst's damage will be improved up until 62 points. And let me tell you, the difference in damage is as big as my depth from Gacha Gaming. Seriously, you want to make sure to absorb at minimum 2 Void Rifts before using the burst, if you want to witness some spectacular damage fireworks. Anyway, let's talk about the last playstyle, Hybrid. You see, when you start on the first floor of Abyss, Skirk's Serpent Subtlety is actually fully maxed out. So, it's possible to open up with her burst and then immediately tap the skill to start spamming normal attacks, which results in extremely fat damage per rotation showcase. Like, I didn't make the calculations yet, but it's about on the same power level as Movwika's first rotation. It's quite insane. But there are some drawbacks. First of all, this is really only viable in Abyss, and since you use the burst initially, the special burst during skill mode is also on cooldown, so you will miss out on those 10 first boosted normals, and will need to do charge attacks to absorb Void Rifts. If that's not enough, the Finale Artifact set actually punishes Skirk, because you can only benefit from the 4th set bonus between 6-second cooldowns. Or in other words, when she uses her burst for 6 seconds, she cannot gain normal attack boost here. So a big chunk of buffing is almost unavailable for almost half normal attack rotation. And this is where if Furina is in the team, Huntress set becomes better to utilize in hybrid rotation. Still, what about second floor onwards? Well, the only way to start off with saved Serpent Subtlety would be something like leaving last enemy on a bit of health and using her hold skill to generate points for the next room, because while tap skill empties out all points after switching out or when the challenge ends, the points are preserved from hold skill, which is something you can also do in open world by fully stacking the points and then using the hybrid playstyle to quickly farm those big dumb bosses. But yeah, those are the 3 playstyles. Now, let's quickly talk about the numbers game. So here's the thing, I'm not entirely sure yet what is the best free-to-play team for Skirk, but I'll be using Chongyun for 8% cryo resistance shred, Xingqiu for off-field damage, and then Mona with Thrilling Tales weapon, or also known as TTDS, while she's also equipped with Noblesse set. I know she's a standard 5-star and not everyone has her, however, the upcoming anniversary will allow you to pick one of the standard 5-stars, so let's just say Mona is about to be a free-to-play option. And with this team in a burst playstyle, Skirk is able to deliver about 850k damage, so pretty impressive already. However, if we go into normal attack playstyle, then she's able to dish out roughly 1.2-1.3 million damage. And when looking at total motion value and duration of both of these playstyles, they actually end up on about similar potential, with normal attack spamming coming out on the top. Although I will say that Xingqiu isn't that amazing for burst, and also I could improve the numbers further for normal attacks if using Dahlia and Calamity of Escher's sword, but alas, I don't have the sword on this server. But what happens when we go into premium mode together with Escoffier and Furina? It's a different world, let me tell you that. The burst ends up dealing about 1.4 million damage, so that's like 60% more than with free-to-play comp. And then the normal attack playstyle ends up dealing around 60 to 70% more damage, so Escoffier gaming, right? But look, this is just numbers pumping for Skirk only. Let's not forget that both Furina and Escoffier also deliver a sizable amount of off-field damage. And sure, I did notice I was using signatures both on Furina and Escoffier, so we could knock away around 5 to 10% extra damage that Skirk would otherwise cause. But long story short, these two units absolutely elevate Skirk's performance, to the point that it almost seems unfair if you ask me. Honestly, not having Furina isn't that big of a deal as not having Escoffier, since more or less, she's the best resistance shredder. And then of course, with Furina, she can help build up fanfare quickly. Oh, and here's Skirk's signature sword showcase. You can see the damage difference here. Of course, it's going to be a lot higher. It's a signature weapon, and a beautiful one at that. In fact, it even has a different visual look when compared to using any other sword. Still, I wouldn't say Skirk is unusable without these two, and maybe I'm missing some crucial free-to-play solution to catch up to that big difference in damage, but even if, let's say I had Eshu Sword, Dahlia, Rosaria, and Xingqiu in the team, it would still not be able to even closely catch up to these two 5-stars, especially if it's just a burst mode playstyle. So, what do we do? Well, let's talk about the team situation then. Remember when I showed you that anecdotal example of Barbara being better than C0 Shilonen with Cinder City and Signature Weapon? So here's the final detail I've been withholding. The second passive called Return to Oblivion states that for every different Hydro and Cryo teammate who hits an enemy, Skirk's burst and normal attacks during skill mode will receive the following damage boost. Now, what we're looking at is more or less a multiplier, not additive damage boost. So that final third boost is actually going to multiply 1.6 times damage increase for burst and 1.7 times damage increase for normals. That is insane, an insane boost, and effectively locks Skirk into one specific team comp archetype, a team made up of only Hydro and Cryo. If that's not enough, Skirk's third passive increases everyone's skill level by 1 if everyone in the party is from Cryo and Hydro, which for some might not matter, but heavy skill damage dealers like Escoffier and Furina of course will capitalize on this. Not to mention, Skirk's skill gives multipliers to those enhanced normal attacks, so yeah. And that's why all Barbara needs to do is hit the enemy once to let Skirk max out this passive. And then this Lady of Abyss will deal better damage than with C0 Shilonen who has Cinder City and Signature. Let it sink in how powerful this multiplier is. In fact, once I give Barbara TTDS, now Skirk deals 29% more damage than with C0 Shilonen. But there is a catch. With some initial testing done so far, the reason why Barbara or basically any Hydro or Cryo option is great here would be due to Escoffier and Furina. If we remove these two from the team and try to make a team comp of, let's say, Rosaria, Mona with TTDS and Noblesse, and then Shilonen, the burst playstyle ends up dealing about 1 or 2% less damage than with the free-to-play team I've showcased before. While this means Skirk ends up dealing slightly less damage, let's not forget that Shilonen's resistance shred and damage boost will be applied to other teammates. So if there's Rosaria or Xingqiu or any other sub DPS, they could benefit from that and end up doing a bit better than free-to-play comp. And you could also swap out Shilonen with Kazuha, who will then provide grouping and similar buffs. Although, so far, I would still say in like 95% of teams I've tested, it's simply better to go with full Hydro and Cryo composition. But what about the other archetypes, like Melt? Well, Skirk's Cryo application is actually pretty mid, and while she can melt some of her hits or even the burst, it's just not as good as a full Hydro and Cryo team. Same goes for something like Hyperbloom. I mean, yeah, you can play it in a team like this, it will be functional, but Skirk will be essentially neutered here. I mean, hey, it's a free world, do what makes you happy. But let's stop pretending here. The time has finally come. You came crawling back to the Hydro and Cryo team superiority. Now what? Well, let's start with the meta situation. Let's say you have Escoffier and Furina. The fourth slot is then left for the big five to duke it out. Mona, Shenhe, Citlali, Yelan, and Mulanni. We already saw how super solid Mona is. Great pick for massive damage showcases, and superb in hybrid playstyle for Abyss. But her biggest drawback is massive ER requirements. But luckily, there's Furina, so that shouldn't be a big problem then. Next, we have Shenhe. Besides the usual goodness of Cryo Resonance Shred and Quills, she can also provide Cryo Application, which can be useful against some annoying annoying bosses, like the latest Secret Source fella, since Skirk's cryo application is not good enough to break him. But as a downside that's typical to her, Shenhe will lack in personal damage. Now, stepping into Natlan, Citlali helps a ton with survivability, and her shield also means you can use the Calamity of Eshu's sword. Oh, and let's not forget Cinder City buff, plus Hydra Resistance Shred and TTDS are her signature too. Although, regarding Cinder City, from my own testing, it seems kinda hard to trigger it consistently, and then if I do find a way to do it, like swapping to her several times, that means her TTDS buff gets wasted, and then something like Signature becomes a lot more flexible. Next, we've got Cheerful Mulani. She's actually a perfect TTDS holder here because it also boosts her overall damage, since she's an HP scaler, plus doing something like skill, then attack, and then burst results in a decent 1 or 200,000 damage. And with her, it's super easy in this team to trigger Cinder City. In fact, you could go the other way around and use Skirk in this team as a quick swap burst support, and then switch to Mulani to do her bidding. It's pretty fun actually. Finally, there's Yalan, and really you could also use Xingqiu in her place here as well, especially if you will play normal attacker Skirk. Both of these have the same barber, and both of them can do great off-field damage. The difference is that Yalan does provide damage buff over time, while Xingqiu can help with a little bit of healing and bigger Hydra application if needed. Now, besides these big 5 options, well, big 6 I guess, but that's copyrighted, there's all the other leftover options, like Mika and Dahlia, who can help with attack speed boosting, Rosaria and Ganyu can help with off-field damage, while Chongyun can do both of these things, but with worse results. Then there's Ayato and Candace, who can help boost normal attack damage, and then of course we have Layla and Diona, who can help with a shield, or you can even go with Kokomi if you want to do that. She can provide Tenacity artifact buff from her skill, and you've guessed it, TTDS, Thrilling Tales of the Dragon Slayers. Yeah. You see, the thing is, Skirk badly needs attack buffing. There's barely anyone from Cryo and Hydro that can do that, and instead, there's plenty of damage buffs, like Cryo or crit damage, but not enough attack, which is why even her weapons that provide attack are valued so highly, and that is why TTDS is such a legendary weapon for any team here. But yeah, finally we can talk about some quick swap teams. Burst Skirk with Neuvillette is actually really strong, to the point that I think kicking out current best teammate Citlali from this team comp is enough to make this Neuvillette's best team comp, because what Neuville lacks is strong front-loaded damage, which Skirk can easily provide. And guess what? You can also give TTDS to Nuvi if needed. Or you could go with this Ayaka team, where she actually can work with all of her playstyles. So instead of Skirk power creeping Ayaka, she is now power friending her. And I know that most team comps so far were shown with Escoffier and Farina, so as alternative options, you could go for something like Citlali, Xingqiu, and Yalan, which will obviously not be as good as the premium meta option. However, it's still strong enough to easily clear the Abyss. By the way, I've been showing the new Abyss all this time, and the floor 12 buffs are crazy good on both sides for Skirk, so I definitely took this into account. But even with the calcs involved, it's obvious you can clear these rooms without those broken buffs. They're just an icing on a cryo cake. And then yeah, there's some free-to-play variations I've shown. Those are pretty great, and as I said, something like Rosaria, Xingqiu, and Dahlia is almost on par with Citlali's team I've showcased, provided Skirk is using Calamity of Eshu in normal attack playstyle. Another team I like consists of Layla, Xingqiu, and Mona to supercharge skill with Calamity of Eshu. But it would be nice if at least there was one Natlan 4-star from either Cryo or Hydro, because now Cinder City is only available with either Citlali or Mulani, and I hope this changes sometime in the future. So what do I think about the Fao's disciple? I think her situation is crystal clear if you've been paying attention to this video. If you don't have Escoffier and Farina, then it's going to be a pretty different experience. And I know this mostly just has to do with damage, but I can't just ignore it and say Skirk is great out of the box. Okay, to be fair, she kinda is. I definitely showcase her with some strong free-to-play teams, but they're still nowhere close to Escoffier's supporting capabilities, which become amplified even more with Farina. On the flip side, at least she has 2 superb free-to-play weapon options. Like I said, the 5-star Absolution I've showcased in this video, it's about as good as Finale of the Deep, and even weaker in shield teams with Calamity of Eshu. So that's pretty cool, but other than that, yeah, with the premium team and hybrid playstyle, I'd say she's definitely up there with the most powerful DPS. In fact, in some cases, she is the most powerful DPS in the game, but again, only if we assume Escoffier and Farina are in the team. I know a lot of videos will be posted on YouTube, including mine, where Skirk will absolutely shred everything out of existence, but there's a 99% chance it's going to be her using those 2 premium supports, unless I missed out on some super secret tech where Skirk can demolish everything in a completely different team. Anyway, thanks for watching, and hope you enjoyed the video. As always, I'd appreciate if you could press the like button and subscribe to my channel, because I do spend a ton of time making these videos. And speaking of spending, nah, but maybe, nah. Okay, I'll see you 6 Skirk if this video gets 40k likes.